the gap between the top 1% and now top 0.1%, in my opinion, has never been wider in terms of like probably any endeavor. And it kind of, it really rings home when I spend extended periods of time working from Melbourne, working, at the office, where I'm around a lot of other businesses that aren't like, in the online space. Obviously, a lot of my friends are in the online space. And I'm kind of interacting with my friends, online on a daily basis, right? We're chatting, we're doing whatever. And then I sometimes forget because they're my friends. I'm like, oh, fuck, these guys are like some of the most skilled entrepreneurs out there, right? These guys are making millions of dollars a year in profit. Businesses are spitting cash. But because they're my friends, right? I'm just like, well, that's just what everyone's doing. But then you go and you put yourself in an environment with other business owners and you realize, oh, fuck, not everyone is at that level, right? And it makes you realize that, and I'm going to try and articulate this as clearly as I can, but there's a gap now that, getting to the top 1% and then the top 0.1%, let's call the top 1% like, profiting $500,000 a year from your business. And, I'm not talking about big corporations, right? I'm talking about like, businesses that you can get up and running and start scaling in a few years, right? These are new businesses that I'm kind of talking about. And what I'm seeing is people who are able to get to the top 0.1% are getting there like faster than ever before. The gap also between the top 1 and top 0.1% in terms of earnings is just getting like monstrously big. And I think it's because a few things are, there's a few things at play, right? The first one being is with the internet now, the access to really anything is kind of just a level playing field now. So I'll give you a random example that came to the top of my head. I could be an Indian person, right? Maybe not the best example because I feel like India has their own VC culture, but let's just say I'm just some guy from an Indian village with an internet connection. I can now probably get my business idea and my pitch in front of VCs in America, in Silicon Valley. That 30 or 40 years ago, I just couldn't do that. So I couldn't get access to that capital, right? Now VC, that's just like a crude example, but you get the point, right? Like I can get my idea in front of people and get access to capital that I couldn't get access to before. I can get access to brilliant minds. I can get access to people through Twitter DMs, Instagram, social media. It's easier to build those relationships now online where previously I would have had to fly across to meet that person, or maybe I would have had to be introduced, or I would have had to go to a conference or something like that, right? So the access to people, it's easier to get access to people. It's easier to get access to really elite people very quickly. And what does access to people mean? It means access to information. And again, it means that the top people are getting access to capital, access to information, access to people, access to unfair advantages. A lot of things in business that previously took a lot of time to build up, relationships, things like that, just happening very, very fast now. Even other things, right? Like you can get access to credit cards, you can get access to suppliers. Now you can go on Alibaba and find a product to sell. You can sell supplements from 10 different manufacturers in the US, whereas 10 years ago, it was very difficult to do that. But the funny thing is with all these things, and of course, the last thing that I do need to touch on because it's the most important part is now media, right? You can create such a huge amount of content that can either go viral, right, on the organic side, for really very little in terms of cost of capital, but that cost of capital is so small compared to the distribution effect. Or the same thing, you can create content for such a small amount that can then be leveraged on paid media. And as long as you have the skill to create compelling content that sells, that can be leveraged en masse. And the targeting from these organic and paid algorithms now are really second to none. Like, it's crazy how you can get your message in front of the right people. And it's never been easier. Whereas before you would have to put ads in a newspaper, or even 5 years ago, Facebook's ad targeting was just not as effective, right? As an example. So you've got all of these things at play, But when you talk to the average business owner, right, this isn't even just the average 9-to-5er, the average just normal person working your job. It's the average business owner. You realize these people aren't tapping into that. They're not on Twitter, DMing, trying to build their connections. They're not on Telegram groups. They're not accessing this information. They're not, trying to get that. They're not trying to build their relationships. They're not trying to build their network. They're not trying to build their unfair advantages. They're kind of just happy plodding along and building their business. And what it means now is that the compounding effects that top 0.1% get now is almost going to go en masse. A good example of this is 2 years ago, I was trying to think in my head, like, how am I going to get my business to, 8 figures of profit a year, let's say, right? And that was my goal. But I just couldn't think of, how am I going to get there? Like, it just didn't seem possible with that particular model. Now in my head, I've got a very clear picture of how I can take a business to probably 20 or 30 million profit a year, and maybe in just a couple of years, right? All because of this access to information that I've kind of been working on in the background. So I guess what's the lesson in this video? I'm just ranting away now. The lesson is that we have all these tools available for us right now, but people still aren't utilizing them. We have tech that's available to, cut your operating expenses because you don't need as many employees. We have the best algorithms. We have organic content that can go viral. We have paid media content that can be scaled. We have access to suppliers. We have access to capital. We have access to everything. It's literally all out there, but people are still sleeping on it. And that means if you're one of the top people, you're watching this video, that means opportunity for you, but you need to put your head down and you need to make the most of it. Because what I'm seeing now is that the gap is getting ever so wider, and it's getting more and more competitive to the point where I think business is going to start to go the way of, there's going to be a select few people making a shit ton of money, more money than you could ever imagine and faster than you can ever imagine. But I think we're going to see a bigger wave of businesses get wiped out because people just haven't kept up with their skill set as things get more competitive. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that opinion as well. As always, like, comment, subscribe, all that shit.